Steven Spielberg memorialized an epic story called Amistad. I want to tell you about that today. Hello, friends. My name is Dr. Bill Payne. I am the pastor at First Methodist Church here in Live Oak, Florida. Back in 1839, in the country of Sierra Leone, there were about 500 Africans who had been rounded up. Some had committed crimes, others owed debts that they couldn't pay, and still others had been captured or had been conquered in war. All of these people were being taken by Portuguese slave traders to Cuba, where they were going to be sold for a hefty profit into slavery. Well, the Portuguese traders loaded them all on board ships and took them to Cuba. Afterwards, there were some left over who were being taken to other destinations. And as they left Cuba, the prisoners who were below deck in the hold broke free. They came up on the deck, took over the ship, killed the captain, killed the cook, sent the others overboard, and they told the navigators that they left alive to take them back to Sierra Leone. Well, unbeknownst to them, instead of taking them to Sierra Leone, the navigators did a strange thing, west and east and north, and finally they were off the coast of New York. And while they were there, a Navy frigate interdicted them and took them to Connecticut because it was still a slave state. And the slaves were put in a prison where they languished for a long time as their case was being heard in the courts. Incredibly, a president and a former president, contended with each other about the outcome of this case. Eventually, well, the problem was Spain wanted those slaves to be sent back to Cuba, and they would have faced immediate execution. The sailors had claimed salvage rights because they were just property, and they insisted that their slaves should be given to them. And the navigators who had been set free also laid a claim on the slaves. Everyone wanted a piece of them. The slaves only wanted to go home. Eventually, the Supreme Court heard the case and ruled 7-1 that the slaves were illegally captured and illegally sent to the Americas. Basically, they were kidnapped, and those who kidnapped them did not own them, but they were the perpetrators, and the slaves had to be freed. And so the slaves were let go. And in the aftermath, abolitionists, but mostly Christians, got together and they raised money for their return back to Sierra Leone. On the ship back, Christian missionaries went with them to punctuate the issue. When they got back to their home in Sierra Leone, most of them disappeared into the environs to be reunited with their families, families that thought they would never see them again. And it's a great story. It's a wonderful story. There is always hope, and there is always the expectation that we will be free and that someday, God, by God's grace, we will be free of everything that keeps us in bondage, and we will enjoy the beauty of God's heaven. I want to read a text to you from Galatians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Paul says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set you free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. Stand firm then, and do not let yourself be burdened again by the yoke of slavery." In the context of Galatians, Paul is talking to people who have been set free by the grace of Jesus Christ. They have been made new creatures in Christ. And they know that it's not through the law or through the spirit of religion or through obedience to the Torah that someone is made free. Keeping the Torah is like being in slavery because you can never satisfy it. At the same time, living in sin is also slavery because the person who lives in sin is a prisoner to sin. The Bible tells us whatever you give yourself to, that you are a prisoner to. And if you live in sin and give yourself to sin, sin will be your master. Sin will own you. It has a power over you that you cannot overcome. However, in Jesus Christ, when we accept Christ, that power is broken and we are set free. Set free not to live sinful lives, set free to live the lives that God has called us to live like God had intended us to be when He created us, to be like Jesus as we are being conformed into His holy image. Imagine what it would have been like for those slaves who had gotten back to their homeland in Sierra Leone and been reunited with their families if they had been captured and sold into slavery a second time and sent back to the Americas to spend the rest of their lives in bondage. That would have been a crime too awful to imagine, just awful, awful. Yet there are Christians who, having been purchased by Jesus and saved from sin and saved from the spirit of religiosity, return to it and are once again enslaved by it. Say no to that and rejoice in your freedom that Christ has given you by living a free life under the lordship of Jesus Christ. May God bless you and may He keep you free.